Welcome, everyone, to the Pockets of Knowledge podcast. I'm your host, Desiree Stanley, and with me today, I'm so thrilled to have Jenilee Samuel. Welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited to get to have this conversation with you.
I am thrilled that you're joining us today because you have some fantastic information to share with all of us. And I'm excited also to learn some things that maybe I don't know about podcasting. So Jenilee is the CEO, Podcast Plan Mastermind, and she's going to tell us all about that in just a minute. But the podcast that you have is Java with Jen, and it's a little bit of a specialized, I want to say, theme. And so I want you to tell us all about it. So how did you decide that you wanted to launch a podcast? What was the driving factors that made you want to just jump in and do that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, even before I answer that, I want to say congratulations on being here as long as you have and for having as many shows as you do, because I read when I started that the average lifespan of a podcaster is 7 episodes. So once you've made it past there, you've made it in podcasting. So congratulations. But I actually got started because my husband and I are pastors vocationally. I grew up a missionary kid in high school and college. I was very involved in ministry, had lots of opportunities to speak in stadiums and do different things. But then something happened when I got married and moved to Southeast Texas, and all the opportunities dried up, even though we were pastors. And so I found myself wrestling and struggling and crying for years, like feeling invisible, like I wasn't going to be able to use my gifts to serve the world. And I just kept patiently waiting to be invited, patiently waiting. Hey, why don't you preach this Sunday? Kept waiting for those invitations, and they just never came. I'm 18 years into pastoring. We've pastored over 4 congregations, and I've never been invited to speak on a Sunday morning, even though I can, and I can preach, And so I, for a while, was very heartbroken and subscribed to the belief for just a short period that people could limit my ability to steward the gifts that God has put inside of me. And that was a very disheartening couple of months when I believed that, because then in essence, I was believing a powerless lie. It made me powerless in my life. And so it took about 2 months, and I was like, you know what? I'm breaking up with this. I don't like this idea anymore. I just realized at the end of my life, there's going to be nobody standing next to me when I stand before the Lord and give an account for my life. No one stands next to me. I don't get to blame anyone. I don't get to make excuses. I have to answer for my life. And so I was like, you know what? Then I'm going to do something to practice and use these skills. And podcasting seemed to be the easiest way to do it. YouTubing was intimidating, and going live on Facebook wasn't an option because I was like, no way. And so podcasting seemed to be the most doable. And it has grown into such a wonderful vehicle for sharing my heart. I've gotten amazing responses from listeners. There was one episode I did on marriage, and I had a guest on there. And one of my listeners had been praying for someone in their family whose marriage was having a hard time. They connected them to my guest. They got marriage counseling, totally transformed their marriage, and now they're happier than ever. And so just little things like that, I'm like, okay, then this is made a difference, and that's what I'm after. So podcasting is a vehicle that is very underrated and the easiest to get into, I feel like, of all the avenues that are out there.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I agree with you in that the message that you're able to share with others and an easy format. Listening is, such a great thing for all of us to hear these stories and these messages in such an easy way, right? It's something that we can do when we're walking the dog, or we're cleaning the dishes, or we're cleaning the house, or we're driving on a long drive, whatever the case may be. Yeah. I think it's such a great way to share the message and the knowledge and information that we have. Absolutely love it. So tell us then a little bit more about your show, Java with Jen, and more of the topics that you're discussing. In fact, I just have to say, I listened to the most recent episode, and it was like it was for me. Because I, recently had a couple of things that came up that didn't line up the way that I thought they were supposed to. And it was an important message. And so I got something from it. So go ahead and tell us a little bit more.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's encouraging. Yeah. So my podcast is called Java with Jen, Hearing God's Voice for Everyday Life. I call it Java with Jen because for years and years and years, the outlet that I did have in pouring into people's lives was the college girls that we pastored would come over and I would make coffee. I kind of learned that if you make someone a cup of coffee, they stick around longer. So I would be like, here's coffee, let's talk. I mean, I had kids everywhere. I had 4 kids and they were like, I was drowning in children. So I was like, I need an adult, stick around. And so I would make them coffee. And so it just kind of became a thing. If they came over, they wanted coffee. And so I was like, conversations over coffee. That's my thing. So Java with Jen, which I mean, it's not the first time it's been thought of, but whatever. But hearing God's voice for everyday life, I decided to go that route because it wasn't until season 4, actually, that I started evaluating. It kind of drove me crazy that my podcast was not real clear what it was about. It was just Java with Jen for the longest. And it kind of drove me crazy that people couldn't come across it and be like, ooh, that looks like it's for me, didn't know what to do. And so I just started asking myself, like, Jenilee, at the end of your life, what message are you wanting to bring to the world? Like Elon Musk, he dreams big and he's doing the things he dreams about. And people who make a difference, it's because they have clarity on where they're headed. I just was like, at the end of my life, if I die and fail at something or don't do something, what would I feel like I had failed at? And I realized it's just in my heart to teach people how to hear God's voice, that it's simple and it's not meant to be complicated. It's meant to be a normal part of the Christian experience. And so I realized it comes out in a lot of my episodes anyways, because it's just who I am and what's in me. So I decided that's going to be my tagline. And so there are a number of episodes on there, 12 and 13 and 37 through 40, that if anyone wants to go listen, where I walk through, like, this is how you can learn to hear God's voice. And it could change your life. Like, I mean, God who created you and knows all things, why wouldn't we want to hear his voice? He's got the best advice. Anyways, that's what the show is about. We cover real life topics though. So everything from setting boundaries to having more joy in parenting. And I had one episode called #MomFails, where we just share a lot of stories of times when we failed as moms and we laugh about it. And it's a lot of fun. We talk about marriage stuff and how to talk to your kids about sex, like all the regular like life topics. But I share how either my guest or myself, how God played a part in the way that we approached that thing. And so it's meant to normalize pulling God into your everyday life.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for going into a little bit more detail about the show. And it has been a delight listening to the show because I didn't necessarily grow up in that, setting. I didn't go to church regularly, but I did grow up in a very spiritual background. So for me, it's, maybe not necessarily the title God, it's universe or universal source or spirit, but the idea is the same. I really feel that there is something maybe bigger than us that is having a hand in our lives, in directing our lives. And there's a purpose for the things that happen in our life. And when we can find the purpose behind the things that happen, we're really growing. And I think that crosses all boundaries, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the podcasting side in terms of launching a podcast. I know you have many years of podcasting experience. And how was it that you started the podcast? Because you've got a fantastic mastermind that you've got coming up. And I want you to share all about that and telling the listeners about how they can do that if it's something that they're interested in. What was it that you did that got it launched?
That was such a journey. I laugh. I laugh at my naivety when I thought podcasting would be the easiest way to get my voice into the world. It is easy and simple. Let me say that it's simple, but learning the things that go along with podcasting, that's where all the work is. The marketing, the email, how to keep up with your community and sending emails. And if you want to do merchandise and all these there was a lot of things to be learned, even graphic design, just to create my graphics, or SEO and learning how to write things that will make people find your podcast when they're searching online. There was just a lot to learn. It was a journey. And I feel like it was probably a good solid 2 years before I started feeling any momentum. It was honestly, there was like the first year I had my podcast, it wasn't really doing anything because I was learning all the other things. I actually created a freebie for your audience if they're interested. If any of them are DIYers or they're interested in starting a podcast, it's kind of like an eagle eye view or like a little roadmap. It's a 7-step checklist. There are more than 7 things on there. It's like 7 categories, 7 areas that you need to have established in order to launch your podcast and do it well and be able to grow it and stuff. So that's a freebie. And I think you're probably dropping the link to that in your show notes. But so that's available if they're interested. Yeah, but I just did a lot of scrappy learning online. I didn't have a budget to work with. So I found tools that are free or they have a free version that I could function on for a while. And so I'm definitely of the philosophy free or cheap. And that's how I've run my show. I hardly spend anything on keeping my podcast up, but it's in the top 1% globally. It's listened to in over 80 nations. So doing something right somewhere.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, if you've got the length of time that you have been broadcasting, as well as the 80 different countries that you said that your show is airing in, that's of course fantastic and does speak to the quality of the show that you have. Thank you for telling us a little bit more about that. And here's something that I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned a couple times about cost, and how do you suggest that people start this without putting a lot of money out there?
Yes. Well, I will say this. If I could go back and do it differently, I would have invested in a coach because, and I mean that genuinely, not just because I coach, but I coach now because I'm like, let me save you the heartache of what I went through, and I have hired a number of coaches at different stages of my journey. I had another business I was running for a while too. And so I see how hiring a coach accelerated my progress. I could have been miles ahead. You learn from all of their troubleshooting. You learn from where they invested in coaches and learned valuable things. And so it's worth it to invest in a coach. But because I didn't do that on the upfront, I just basically bought a microphone. And so I found an inexpensive microphone. And I remember I had to pray for that money. I didn't have that money. And eventually I invested in Canva, which is the program that I use to create all my graphics. And that's pretty much it. There's been a little bit of expenses here and there, just like small, tiny ones. But that's pretty much what I invest in to run my show. But yeah, if I could do it again, I would have hired a coach yesterday, like 5 years ago. It would have made things so much easier.
Thank you for speaking on that, because that is something that I think a lot of people are like, what do you wish you knew like then that could have helped you? And so it sounds like that somebody else who has experience doing what you want to do, of course, they're going to be able to help you cut out a lot of wasted time and energy and mistakes. I mean, you're going to make your own mistakes, of course, but they're going to help you really cut out so much of that you're going to be leaps ahead. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I was going to say too, honestly, looking back, because I didn't put a lot of money in, I didn't have a lot of wasted money. But I know a lot of people that they just go in and they start buying all the programs, all the apps, all the this, they put the money in because, you feel more invested that way. You feel more ownership. But then it's a lot of wasted money because you don't realize what you don't know and you don't realize what you don't need until later on. And so that's one of the other advantages of walking with somebody is they can tell you, don't put your money there. Like my business coach today, she was like, I would tell you if you had this amount of money, don't put it in the website yet. Do this, and then do the web. I have a website, but that's what she was saying is she can save you. I could save my students investing unnecessarily. So that's another major help.
Oh, for sure. 100%. I agree with that. You don't know what you don't know. And you start throwing money at these things. And then you realize later on, I didn't need that. I didn't need to spend the money on that, but now it's too late. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Why waste money? There's no reason for it when you don't have to. So that's awesome. And you mentioned a little bit about some 7 steps. And yes, for sure, I'll include that in the show notes, a link to that. But if you wanted to share a little bit, maybe just a couple of those with us now, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I cover about, like in my mastermind, we cover those 7 steps, but I break it up in about 10 weeks. And so in week 1, we talk about just the basics of podcasting, what equipment they'll need, what programs and apps they need to download, what websites they need to sign up for. And I get all that set up front. And then week 2 is your podcast identity. So knowing who are you talking to? What problem is your podcast solving? Like having a show that's a very broad topic doesn't always serve you because people think more uniquely than just I'm a woman. You know, I think I'm a Christian woman with lots of children and not a lot of time on my hands, or I'm an entrepreneur woman with lots of, you know, so I'd be more interested in a podcast that's geared towards someone that matches a few of those criteria, right? And so niching down your podcast is a difficult but important part of the process in creating the identity of your show. I talk about branding and how to create the visual aesthetics so that wherever your show shows up online, there's a cohesion throughout it. It looks more professional, it looks more credible, and it just is nicer. People just appreciate it. Then they begin to recognize you based on your colors or your text or whatever. The branding is very powerful for brand recognition. And then we go into the recording part and figuring out music, like, can I use this kind of music? Will I get sued if I use that music? You know, like how to figure all that out. And then I teach them about formatting their show and having guests on and how to interview well, how to get things organized. I provide them with planners and stuff so that they can keep their shows organized. And then marketing, how to like get it out to the masses. It's no good having a show if no one can find you, right? So how to get it out to the people that will be interested. And then lastly is also how to monetize your show, because some people, it's an extension of their business, or maybe it's a way people learn of their business. And so learning how to even turn your podcast into a full-time income is one thing that we talk about. And then getting on YouTube. So there's a number of things, email marketing and blogging. We go into that to help them get found online. So there's a lot of things we cover, but it's important to me. The reason it's broken up in 10 weeks is we could smash it into a much shorter project, but I want it to be something people can build into their lives alongside a full-time job, because not everybody has the luxury of quitting their job to go start a podcast, you know, or women who are raising children and having to shuttle their kids around all the time and school and all that. It has to be able to fit into the life for it to be a blessing. I want podcasting to be able to be a blessing. That way it's something that can go the distance. So those are some of the things that we cover. And I try to make it where my students cannot fail. If they go through my mastermind, if they follow the instructions and work with me, I offer the one-on-one coaching calls as well throughout the 10-week course, which is more than what I find a lot of coaching on this level does. But it's because it's important to me that they don't feel overwhelmed, that they don't get stuck, and that they are able to successfully launch their shows. It's a wonderful group. I just love it.
That's excellent. Thank you for going into so much detail there and telling us about the different things that are covered through the course. And I agree with you. When we're busy and we're doing a lot of things in our regular life, we maybe have a job and kids and whatever else, keeping up the house, you get too overwhelmed, I think, if you're trying to just cram that in a too short of a period of time. So it sounds like you've formatted it in such a way that people can really make it work for whatever life that they're leading. So that's awesome. And I want to talk a little bit more about, you mentioned businesses. If somebody has a business and they're thinking, maybe I want to launch a podcast, why do you think that's a good idea for them?
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, I feel like the whole nature of a podcast is what I've learned, especially in interviewing so many people. Everybody has a message. And everybody's looking for a way. I think our human nature is trying to find a way to bring who I am into the world to make the impact it's supposed to have, right? And in essence, in one way or another, that usually boils down to a message or a service. And whether that's you're a doctor saving lives or you're a teacher, you have a message, but you're also teaching children, you know, so everyone has the way they're serving humanity. And so for businesses, podcasting is valuable because people won't buy from a business unless they trust that business and they're confident that that business can solve their problem. And so podcasting solves both of those in that people build trust with you because they listen to you talk, they experience your knowledge, they experience your expertise, they troubleshoot with some of the things you suggest and they implement, and then they see if it's successful. So you're building a rapport with people so that if they're followers of your podcast and they encounter you on the podcast, they trust you. And so they're more inclined to spend money with you or to employ your services or whatever than someone who doesn't encounter you and just comes across your website.
Yeah, great points. And talking a little bit more about marketing, and so how this plays into the marketing of the business also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I just went through a training talking about how using your podcast can be the top of your funnel where people learn about your business through your podcast, and then you take them on a journey through various different methods to learn, build trust, and to learn about you and learn how you can solve their problem. And so yeah, podcasting is it's a non-invasive, low pressure way to build a relationship with potential clients and to serve them, even to serve them just on the upfront, so.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to ask you, as an entrepreneur yourself, how have you found, and like maybe what challenges have you encountered, trying to build a business and your life, working everything together? What are some challenges maybe that you've encountered, and kind of how have you worked around them, worked over them, gotten through them? What would you like to share on that?
Girl, summertime is a challenge, man. When all the kids are home and I'm like, I'm just trying to get work done. Leave me alone so I can work. No, I'm actually really thankful that I didn't have any jobs or businesses when my kids were little, so I could really just be present and enjoy them. But even doing this, I've had to learn, because obviously I don't want my relationships with my kids to suffer. I don't want my priority of my family to fall into the wrong order of the other things in my life. And so I've just had to learn how to protect the time that I do have to work. I've had to learn that sometimes that means I have to take up the burden of getting up early or staying up late, so I'm not cutting into the time that my kids deserve to have me. And so yeah, just organization is humongous. Like I've just had to learn to batch working is huge. And then also I found, and this the Holy Spirit gave me the wisdom for, because at one point I was running my styling business. I'm a wardrobe stylist as well, and a podcaster and a pastor and mentoring people and social media and all the things. And so I literally sat down and I was like, Lord, unless you give me an idea, like my brain is cramping from stress because I can't do all of it. And the Lord gave me the idea of just designating certain days to certain tasks. So like Monday was my recording day, and I just made sure that that all got done, so my episode was ready on Tuesday, and then Wednesday was social media day to use all that content and create social media for the next week. So he gave me strategies, and it helps simplify the crazy. And so that helped a whole lot.
I love what you said, though. Really, batch work is a great way to manage a lot of different things, for sure. And, the idea that what's really important to you, right?
Mhm.
Considering what's really important to you. And yeah, maybe you're going to have to get up a little bit earlier so it doesn't interfere, whatever it is that you want to do, write a book, run a business, whatever the case may be, you have to get up a little bit earlier so it doesn't interfere with the thing that is number one in your life. And that's a
Yes.
great point.
Yeah.
So remembering those things, what's most important and why, and how do I organize everything else around that, I
Yes.
think is the key.
Yeah. Well, and it also has this way of streamlining, like you're saying, prioritizing what's important. It made me realize that all of my stress wasn't that it wasn't manageable. It was that I just didn't have a system. And which is also part of what I teach my students, is how to have a system, because anything you're doing, writing a book, raising kids, running a career, running a business, anything will be a burden if you don't have a system to make it happen and have a flow in your life, have a routine. I realized it wasn't also unmanageable, and that the tasks I needed to do weren't as many as it felt like. And so that helped a lot. So yes, running a podcast or a business alongside of a regular life is totally doable. You just need a routine.
And so you talked a little bit about just now,
Mhm.
you had to sort of get it organized. And do you use some kind of system in terms of like a planner or an organizer and you hinted at that when you were talking about the podcast course? Is there something specifically that you do, or is it just really like a bullet list?
Depending on my workflow, like what I'm working on, it does change what tool I'm using. So I use two primary tools. Well, we'll say three. I use my calendar in my phone, to make sure that things, especially that are of a time sensitive, that they go on my calendar. But I do keep a regular day planner. I keep a regular day planner that, in fact, I can give you the link for the day planner if your people want it, because it's gangbusters. It's awesome. So it helps you track your quarterly goals, your monthly goals, and your weekly agenda. And it just breaks it all down, and it's undated. So if you get off for a few weeks, you don't lose those days in your planner. It's wonderful. I keep things just when my brain is overwhelmed. I just write everything down. But when it comes to running my podcast, I actually did create planner sheets that I use. And so I have some that are designated like this right here. But anyways, it's a planner sheet for episodes. And so I just kind of thought through everything I needed for an episode and put it into a planner. And then I have a monthly planner, a quarterly planner for more of a broad view of like what's coming, a social media planner, and a financial planner. So I just created a bunch of those in Canva. I do supply those templates to my students, and so they can kind of tweak them and adjust them to make them fit their life. But that was a game changer, man. Before I had that, trying to schedule all these people, I just got so lost and disorganized. And so once I did that, I just found myself getting ahead, not forgetting as many things. And it was just, it helps so much. So yeah, that's what I do, those three.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that you created those is fantastic. Some of us are not as, creative in that way. And yeah, so for sure, the planner that you mentioned, I'd love to be able to link that in the show notes, because some of us just need something that's ready for us to just write things down.
Yep.
But I love that you've got that creativity, and you've talked about Canva, and it is a fantastic tool.
Mm-hmm.
I love it as well, using that to create my thumbnails for the show episodes. But I'm sure there's so much more that it can do.
Yeah.
So I love that you shared that. And if anyone is interested, I'll put that in there as well. But I want to ask you, what do you feel like the key kind of decisions or the turning points that sort of happened in your life that led you this way? And we talked a little bit at the beginning about you made the move and some things didn't line up the way you thought they would, but was there anything else that really pointed you in this direction?
I don't know that there was anything specific. It was just more the journey of it all. The fact that for years and years and years, I was miserable. I mean, because any of us, if you feel like you don't have your voice, especially if you're a communicator, it just feels like your soul is dying, But what I appreciate about that is what I thought was trying to shut me up was actually the vehicle or the circumstances that just simply forced me to look another direction. And now my voice is listened to in over 80 countries. I couldn't have done that in the four walls of a church, And so the fact that I took what was hard and I was like, this is not the end of me. I am not going to let this determine my future. I'm not quitting. I'm not giving up. I'm not going to let my soul die in this place. And so I was like, what else am I not seeing? What else is there? And I feel like from so many entrepreneurs that or people who have ever done anything great with their lives, they say the same thing. They're like, those things that were closed doors or lost opportunities or things didn't work out like I thought, like you mentioned, that oftentimes those are the doors that are simply meant to steer us down a hallway to another door. We have to make sure we don't get stuck in that disappointment, because our brains, we dream up the future and we try to make a map for ourselves, right? Because that's how our brains are built. But God is so much bigger than our little imagination. Why would I think that what I can dream up for myself is the greatest that could happen? That's so silly. God is bigger than that. And his plans for me, the Bible says that his plans for us are greater. His imaginations are greater than ours. And so for people to realize that when a door closes, they can rest and trust. Some of them are painful, and I understand that. But if we can stay in the place of resting and trusting that if you're a Christian, you believe that your steps are ordered by the Lord. And if you believe in the universe, then you may believe that fate is ordering your steps or whatever. But just getting into that space of trust and rest, because it doesn't serve you at all to get all worked up about it. You're just going to traumatize yourself through those emotions. And so resting that, then there's something else. Life doesn't happen to me. It happens for me. And so I believe this is for me, and I'm going to let it work for me. And I'm going to pick my head up and look at what other opportunities might be presenting themselves. So I feel like that's really captures how I landed here.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that you said that it's happening for me, that these things that we often want to say, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And if you
Yeah.
change your perspective and you think, why is this happening? And is it happening for me? And if that's the
Mhm.
case, what am I missing here that I need to be thinking about? What do I need to be considering that I'm not seeing? And I love that because it just switches up that whole negative mindset that you can have thinking like, oh, this is happening to me. Something else is happening to me, but it's happening for me and why. And
Yeah.
then you can look, like you said, down the hallway and maybe there's something else that you need to be doing instead that's so much better than what you initially thought. And I love
Yeah.
that.
It's so true. And to be honest, back, and I guess this maybe would play a part when I started my podcast, I had intended to launch in 2017, but our house flooded in Hurricane
Mm.
Harvey. Hurricane Harvey came in. We had no idea how bad it was going to be, but when we evacuated, that was the last time we saw our belongings because we had 10 feet of water in our house. And it was devastating. Practically speaking, it was the whole community was devastated. And I remember going through that situation, and my concern was for my children because they were much younger back then, and I was concerned. I was like, this is technically a traumatizing experience, but I know that, like you're saying, with the mindset, how we look at a situation and the story we tell ourselves about the situation determines how traumatizing it is or not. And I understand that more now on this side of things, because when we were walking through it, I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, I need an idea. How do I protect my kids' hearts from the trauma of losing everything that they owned? I mean, we owned the clothes on our back and the structure of our house, and that was all we had. And the Lord spoke to my heart, and he reminded me of another preacher's words who says, I stay encouraged by looking to see what God is doing, and keeping that lens of looking, what is God doing on my behalf? And so that became our mantra as we walked through that. And so every time the kids I would pick them up from school once we got back into a routine, and someone had bought them beds, or someone had bought them bikes, or someone paid off their lunches for the rest of the year, so I didn't have to worry about lunches, or they paid off their tuition for the rest of the year, or someone provided us a house to stay in and we didn't even have to pay rent. All these things kept happening for us. And so I would point the kids' eyes to that and say, guys, look what happened today. Look what God is doing for us today. And by the end of the year, when New Year came around, we were reflecting on the year as a family. And I asked the boys, I said, boys, you've had a hard year. What was your favorite part of the year? Like, looking back over it, what was the best part of the year? And they all said, like in a chorus, they were like, Hurricane Harvey. And I was like, what? Like, what are you guys talking about? You lost everything you loved. You lost your toys and all this. And they were like, oh, well, because God did so much for us and he blessed us and got us new toys and new bikes and new beds and new this. And they were distracted from the trauma with the blessing. And I feel like that became just a life principle that I have anchored my heart on every time I go through something hard now. And so if it's someone who's listening and they have a message to get out, or they have a business to build, or they have something and they just keep hitting roadblocks, I would encourage them to stop looking at the roadblocks and ask, where is the door open? Like, where is there grace on my life? Where is there favor? What can I walk through? And where else should I be looking? And it's amazing how life unfolds in ways that we don't expect.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that story. And I do remember when Hurricane Harvey happened. And now, if you're following anything that was happening with the fires in Maui and what has happened there on the island is just, absolute devastation. That's a incredibly difficult position to be in. And so to take what you just shared and to look at, where is God's hand? Where are the blessings happening? And the community coming together to support each other. They're always about Ohana, the family, and we are a human family. And so they may not be your biological family, but they are still your family, and they're helping each other and coming together to help the community. And so
Yeah.
you have to look at, where are the positives in such a negative situation that has happened.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing your experience and how you were able to help your children look at where the good is. And that's, I think, so important for us all to remember, where is the good.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, for sure. And I want to talk a little bit about, to change gears here just a smidge. Let's talk a little bit more about the mastermind that you have that's going to be launching soon, because the idea of people being able to share their voice, their story, the knowledge that they have in the podcast format is your expertise, and you're teaching people how to do that. And so I want you to take some time right now and share a little bit more about that with the listeners.
Absolutely. I am launching my next round on September 10th. And so it's just around the corner. I'm going to keep doors open for the first 2 weeks after, because it's not so hard to catch up on the first 2 weeks, but beyond that, it'd probably be a bit much. And so the doors will be open till, what is that, September 24th? Yeah. And it's very exciting. It's basically the topics that I covered earlier. And then it's set up where it's a once a week Zoom call where it's live. And so I get on and teach live. That way the students can like ask their questions. And even after the 1 hour of coaching on that specific topic, then we've got 30 minutes of Q&A. That's optional. They don't have to stay for that, but they always do because it's valuable time. So it's just once a week. It's on Sunday afternoon. I give them their topic for the week, and it comes with just like a homework checklist. Hey, these are the things you want to tackle to get this accomplished. And then that's what they work on throughout the week. And they can always drop their questions, or if they're stuck, they can get feedback in the Facebook group where all the students are. And we're like one big encouraging little supportive family. It's so precious. And I love my students way more than I love the whole process more than I expected to. Once we graduate, so like once the week is over, they've got the Facebook group, and they also can schedule a one-on-one call with me. They have 4 of them available to them throughout the course. That way they never get stuck or overwhelmed. And then when the whole program is over, really by week 5, they'll have their first episode up. The course it takes 10 weeks just to get all the extra learning in, but they can start sharing their episodes by week 5 if they're on track with what we're learning. And then when they graduate, a lot of my students were like, I don't want to say goodbye. How do I keep coaching? Can we learn more things? Because it's the bare bones. It's kind of kamikaze. I throw you in deep. I teach you all the things, but you can only learn so much in a certain amount of time, right? And so there's still so many things to learn. I'm still learning, and I've been doing it for years. And so they wanted to keep growing. So I created a podcast network. It's called Imagine Media Podcast Network, off of the scripture Ephesians 3:20 that says that. And so that's what that's built off of. And they can come into that. It's just an annual fee or a monthly fee, and it's very minimal. And we do once a month coaching. And every week I kind of just drop little valuable pieces that can help them achieve their goal, whether we're working on monetization or building your email list or networking and growing your show, whatever it is. And so that's been a real blessing as well. And for anybody who doesn't have 10 weeks, I have 2 other options. If they want to do it at their own pace, and maybe they want to take longer than 10 weeks, or they want to just do it fast and get it done, I have a digital course, which is the videos from the mastermind, and they can just do that on their own time. And that's the more budget-friendly approach. Then we've got the mastermind, and then I have a 2-day jumpstart. So if they are just like, ain't nobody got time for 10 weeks, let's get the sucker done, then I can do it in 2 days. I come to them if travel allows, depends on how far away they are. But if travel allows, then I come to them, and in 2 days, I will take their headshots. I'll create their artwork for them. I'll do their branding for them. I get the equipment to them before I ever show up, and I get them physically set up in 2 days. And it's a lot of learning. So they need to come with the coffee in hand. It is a lot of learning, but that comes with an automatic membership for their first year into my podcast network. And so those are the 3 options: the digital course, the 10-week mastermind, and the 2-day jumpstart.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. That third option. Oh my goodness, you better be ready to go.
Yeah.
But that just sounds so fantastic that you're offering those different options for people to choose what works best for them. So I love that for sure. And I think that you said you had a special that you wanted to make available.
Yes.
If you want to go ahead and share that.
Yes, absolutely. So Desiree, her name is the coupon code that if you sign up, you hear this episode and you're like, I think I want to do the mastermind or even the 2-day jump start, then you can use this coupon code when you sign up and register. It'll save you $200. And so that'll also let us know who came because they were listening to Desiree's podcast. So it allows us to keep track of where you come from, but it also saves you some money, the listener. And so if you would like to do that, I think I gave Desiree a couple links that are in the show notes. There's the freebie, the 7-step checklist, but then there's also a link that you'll find down there. It's javawithjenpodcast.org. And it has to be org. If you do com, it'll take you to my website. So do org, and that'll take you to a page where you can sign up to book a call with me. If you'd like to ask some questions and just kind of get into the nitty gritty of the program and find out which one is the best fit, and then I can help you get signed up from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for making that offer available for the listeners. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. It's been fantastic. Before we go, I always like to ask the guests if there's any books that they've read or are reading that have been beneficial or influential that you would like to share with the listeners, or if there's any other podcasts that you'd like to share that have been helpful for you.
Oh my gosh. So many resources I could give you right now. Well, how about for practical for books, we'll go with the day planner and I'll give you the link. And so that day planner that they can get from Amazon. But if you're a reader and you're like, so many books, so little time, then this would be my recommendation. There's an app called Headway. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
Okay, Headway's amazing. It's basically an app where you can either listen to or read through a book in about 15 to 20 minutes.
Oh,
No, it's basically the footnotes of the book is what you're getting. So if there's like a lot of business books I want to get through, it dials it down to the most nutritious parts of the book. And so you get kind of the skeleton of it. So then it actually helps me decide, do I want to get the real book, like the actual book, and just really dive into it deeper, or maybe those nuggets were sufficient and I got the wisdom it was offering. And so I think last year I read something like 52 books just in that app. That doesn't include books I read outside of the app. So Headway is what it's called. It's amazing.
okay. Yeah, for sure. I'll include that in the show notes, and I'm going to take a look at that myself because that does sound like a fantastic option. And is there any podcasts you like to share?
Oh, yes. 2 that I love for business and all of that is Amy Porterfield, her podcast. I think it's Marketing Made Easy. I think that's it. And then Jenna Kutcher, the Gold Digger podcast. I love both of them. They're both like, when I listen to them, I'm like, Lord, can you please help them be my friend one day? Can we be friends one day? I just love them. They're the best. So I recommend both of those.
Oh, fantastic. And I'll include those in the show notes as well. I do listen to Jenna Kutcher's as well, and she's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love her show. So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again, Jenilee. It's been wonderful. I have so enjoyed our conversation today. Lastly, I would like to have you share where people can reach out to you. You've shared the website, you've shared where they can reach you for the mastermind. Is there like an Instagram or anywhere else that you'd like to share that people can follow your journey and your story?
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys would like to follow me, I am most likely on Instagram. I have a Facebook page. You can jump over there, but I really give my attention to Instagram. It just feels, I don't know, more tangible, easier to get a hold of people. And so my handle is just Java with Jen with one N, only one. And you can find me on Instagram, and then we can connect from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And again, I'll put that in the show notes for the listeners for easy access. Jenilee, thank you again so much. I so appreciate your time and all the information that you've shared. And it's just been wonderful. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an honor.
We'll talk more soon.
Okay, sounds good.